Alan Brown from New South Wales Farmers, thanks for joining us again on Flow.
Oh, you're welcome.
Now, we talked about 8 weeks ago about the mouse plague and whether it was getting down into the Riverina. How's it looking there now?
It's quite variable. In the east, it seems to be at a nuisance level, but if you go out towards the irrigation areas, it's certainly having a major impact, and it's quite variable. Some places I'm hearing reports where they're not too bad, in other places they're absolutely awful. It depends a lot too on if it's summer crop or winter crop. In this area where I am at Wagga Wagga, it's all winter cropping, of course.
Yeah.
So the damage is confined basically to vehicles and domestic. But if you go further west of here in the irrigation areas where there's lots of summer crop, well, the damage is absolutely catastrophic.
And how are things travelling? I know the New South Wales Farmers are staging an event with the CWA in Parliament House in Sydney today. But How are things travelling when it comes to baiting and assistance from the state government on that front?
Baiting's problematic because A, because it's very expensive, and B, because there's a lot of residual material on the ground. Unless farmers take steps to get rid of it, the habitat's great for mice, and also the alternative food source is very good for mice. So baiting's problematic unless you can get rid of all the alternate food sources.
Yeah.
And that's been very problematic for farmers because there are a lot of silo bags on the ground, and there's a lot of loose grain on the ground as a result of last year's big crop.
Yeah, there was a statement that came out from the CSIRO yesterday. They'd done some work with the GRDC, I think, about doubling the dosage with the baiting that they're doing and getting approval for that to happen. But what I picked up in there is the mice seem to be fairly selective. They can, once they pick up the scent or whatever, they go away from that baiting and go for something else if there's an alternate food source. That's
the problem. You need to find a way, and it's not easy, but you need to find a way to reduce the alternate food supply.
Yeah.
So you force some mice into the bait, or otherwise, baiting's problematic. And that's certainly been almost impossible with the amount of feed, because in my area here, we've basically had a green summer, so the food sources are still growing.
Yep.
And that's causing a problem all of its own. I mean, domestic baiting seems to be working quite well, but in the field baiting is very problematic because of the alternate food supply.
Yeah, and there's been mention, I think, in the CSIRO publications about no-till farming and that approach to farming that leaves a bit more supply out there in the paddock. Is that that's what you're seeing?
Yeah. And people need to understand you're seeing increased burning this year, but you need to understand that part of the cause of that is just trying to remove the mouse habitat and the alternate food supply for mice. So it's been a feature of this year where farmers are trying to get rid of the cover on the ground, which normally they'd rather retain, but because of the mouse problem, they need to get rid of it.
Yeah, I see. And so what is, are you able to say what New South Wales farmers are seeking at this point in time from the state government in terms of any assistance?
Yeah, well, they're seeking urgent action to implement a financial support package, providing up to $25,000 per farm business as a 50% subsidy on bait products. I mean, it won't cure the problem, but hopefully it'll give some farmers some assistance, because some people are spending very, very large amounts of money on bait.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to spend the money, but it's another thing when it just doesn't work, and that's what's going on out there at the moment. In a lot of cases, the baiting's just not being successful.
Yeah, well, one baiting run for sort of per acre or per hectare, it's a sizable amount compared to the amount farmers usually spend on all of their pest and weed management in a year.
That's right, and that's the problem. And as I said before, it's one thing if you pay and it works, but if you pay and it doesn't work. I had an example of a Canamble farmer who had a beautiful crop of sorghum, and he baited it 5 times trying to stop the mice and still lost the entire crop.
Yeah,
and that's like $250,000 or $300,000 loss. And it compounds the problem.
Yep, and then when you look at the CSIRO say that in 1993, when they say they had the worst mouse plague, that did about $93 million damage across agriculture, and the 2010-11 one did a similar amount of damage. That's the big dollars we're talking about. If we don't spend the money now in the baiting, we're looking at 80, 90, even 100 million we could lose if the plague gets out of control.
And the problem too is machinery, because all modern machinery is heavily computerised and electronic, and if you get mice and rats chewing on the wiring, which they do, it becomes a real problem, and it can lose very large amounts of machinery. And I do insurance testing, and I saw several cases last year where the rodents had chewed on the wiring of large headers and caused them to catch fire.
Wow.
So it's a real problem that, it's compounded by the high value of machinery and the fact that a lot of it's computerised these days.
Yeah, well, we'll check in with New South Wales farmers how things have gone in Sydney today and whether they're getting an audience with the politicians.
No problem.
Thanks for giving us an update on how things are going locally for you.
You're welcome, Ricky.